us start because we have very interesting interventions, and I would like to welcome all of you for joining us today for this seminar ahead of the European elections in June. We agreed with our good friend and partner, Jenny Capelli, the director of Seidel Foundation in Greece, to organize this discussion on the trends of public opinion. So this is not a discussion about elections per se, it's about the challenges of the European elections and how public opinion perceive these elections, and also about the tools and the techniques of communication to reach out to public opinion at a pan-European level. And since we have Nancy Snow with us, a prominent expert on communication from US, and because US also has entered the phase of elections, it would be interesting to compare notes between the two sides of the Atlantic. I have to stress that Nancy is here as Fulbright scholar for Pandion and IDIS. And on this occasion, I would also like to warmly thank Artemis Enetou, the head of Fulbright Greece, for her support, the support of the office and the program to our institute, and to the continuing cooperation that we consider very fruitful. And if I'm not mistaken, there are some Fulbright alumni present here today. I don't know, because Fulbright Alumni Association extended the invitation, so we welcome also the alumni to this meeting. I have the pleasure to have the participation of very experienced colleagues on the topic, starting with our only male participant in this panel, because George Mouroutis is running for elections, and he sent me a text just now that that he would not be available to join, unfortunately, because he had a meeting with the Association of Merchants of Athens, which apparently brings more votes than, a discussion between academics. But anyway, he's a very good colleague and friend, and we apologize on his behalf that he will not be here. So we'll start with Jenny, our co-partner for this meeting. Then we will go to Andonis, because Andonis, together with our institute, is presenting periodically the findings of the pan-European polls in all countries. So to get a taste of what is going on in the field. And then I will pass the floor to Nancy for the American experience and broader, to Annie and Betty. Betty is, I would say, a specialist on communication, and she's working on many innovative tools about how public opinion works. And Annie, my good friend, from a political perspective, because there are many challenges for the European Union. Annie served at the European Parliament for 5 years, if I'm not mistaken, 7 years, as a member of the Parliament, and also as Vice President, with a huge experience in European affairs, and one very, how to say, inspiring legislation about the tax on financial transactions. If this tax had been implemented, maybe our countries would be better off. But unfortunately, it was not adopted by the member states. Anyway, and why I'm stressing the fact that there is an interest on European elections. There is an interest of observers, let's say, politicians, political parties, but we don't know if there is an interest of the public opinion. Because, most probably they will have the highest level of absenteeism ever, these elections, and also the political stake for these elections is that Europe, everybody agrees on this, have to find its way after very radical changes in the European environment, which are mostly the two wars, Ukraine and Gaza. So a lot of things to discuss, and I hope we will be up to your expectations. So, Jen, please.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much, for hosting this event today in cooperation with the Hans Seidel Foundation. Our cooperation is always fruitful. Thank you very much for the Institute for the International Relations. And thank you all of you for your coming, for your participation to this discussion. A few comments on the upcoming European elections. Experience shows that the risk of cyber attacks and disinformation increases before elections, such as the upcoming European elections. Many EU countries, like Germany, assume that there may be targeted campaigns by foreign countries in the run-up to the European elections that are intended to influence the formation of the opinions and voting behaviors. In addition to cyber attacks and hack and leak campaigns, this also includes the spread of false reports via social media. We should use our vote to stand for democracy. Democracy starts with the people. We kick things off by voting in the European elections, and the decisions made there affect our lives. In an increasingly complex, unstable, and interconnected world, the European Union deals with global challenges that no EU country can tackle successfully on its own. We need, I think, a stronger and more united Europe to face the main challenges ahead of us. We confront an existential threat in the form of climate change, or an existential as well threat of migration. We need to deal with Europe's technological lag, and we must expand the defense aspect of what was once conceived as a project of peace. Therefore, a stronger and more united Europe is imperative. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Jenny, for these comments. And now we'll pass the floor to Andonis for the presentation of the findings of the latest polls. I would also like to stress that we are doing this exercise in cooperation with a big media outlet, Tovima. Yes. And you can find also at Tovima.gr the sequence of the presentations of Andonis. Thank you very much again, Andonis.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I would like to extend my gratitude for the invitation from IADIS to participate in this panel with such interesting experts. It is truly an honor for me to participate here. I'm going to present some results coming from latest opinion polls from one side, and by the end of the day, I'm going to apply a new methodology that we have presented last year, the World Association of Public Opinion Research in Salzburg, concerning indicators that help us to better understand people behavior concerning European Union. So, okay, first I would like to focus in the way that how we have collected the methodology that we collect the data. First is the data collection. For the data collection, we have used opinion polls published across the European Union, and we used the latest 6 opinion polls from each member state. Then we apply for each member state the law that exists for this election. Then we know for each political party, national party, to which political group belong. And then we compile the results, and we have, let's say, an expectation of the results. However, I would like to underline that there is some risk. The first risk is the turnout. The turnout, it is different in each member state, okay? But in some member states, it's very low. For instance, Czech Republic, Slovakia, they have a very low turnout for European election. That means less than 40%. That affects the prediction, because if we predict, we have opinion poll concerning the 80% of the population, and by the end of the day, 30% of the population is going to vote. Okay, if it is, let's say, a projection of the 80%, that doesn't affect the result, but it is, let's say, a subset of a specific party, political party that they are going to vote, and a subset of specific political party they are not going to vote, automatically the prediction, it is not correct. The second point is that it's very difficult to, let's say, it's another difficulty, it's not impossible, is the platform. In some countries, political parties, they join their force to one platform, independently if they are socialist or, let's say, EPP, they are going to, in Romania, this is the case, they are going to join in one political party. The outcome, we know how many members of European Parliament are going to elect, but it is difficult to predict in which political group they are going to join by the end of the day. Okay, we can probably extrapolate on the basis of the power of each political party in the previous opinion polls. The third problem is the regional cases. In Italy and Spain, we have, let's say, a similar problem. And then also another problem specific for the Germany, as Germany is going to elect 96 parliamentarians, and there is no basic threshold. Automatically, a political party with 0.7% of the popular vote can secure a seat in the European Parliament. This small political parties, it's outside of the radar of opinion polls. We don't know, for instance, which political party, if the Familien or some, that it is outside of the radar, it's very difficult to predict. Okay, so we have put it as non, let's say, it's other parties, and it is they are not participate in a political group. Okay, let's have a look at what we have got, we have published in the last VIMA. So this is the outcome of the elections. We have the European Popular Party, Public Party, EPP, with 178 seats, Socialists 150, Liberals 77, ECR 86, ID 86, Left 47, Greens 46, and there are 50 parliamentarians that we don't, let's say, allocate in a group right now. Okay, some of them, they are going to join a political party, especially the Greens. They are going to increase their force by the end of the day, but a lot of them, they remain independent. For instance, from Greece, the Communist Party, it is outside of any political group. In Hungary, the main political party is independent. So it is very difficult to predict in which political party they are going to join. I have compared the results that we have published in VIMA with similar predictions published in other platforms, for instance, Euractiv, Politico, or the Wikipedia. So despite the differences between those, let's say, 4 predictions, however, the main, let's say, rapport de force remains, okay? We can, so, and it is a clear fight for the 3rd position between liberals, ECR, and ID. So, okay, we are going to continue to assess. By the end of the day, we are going to know the results of the elections the night, or even at the end of the election date. It will be very difficult to know what will be exactly the composition of political group. This is a slide that I think, in my opinion, is quite interesting. I think for each member state, we have identified the loser and the gain concerning a political group. Okay, so okay, so that means, for instance, we have here in Italy. In Italy, for instance, we have a gain of the ECR. This is Fratelli d'Italia. They are going to increase drastically their power. And from the other side, we have a drastically reduce in Italy of ID, because this is, I think it is the Lega di Nord that are going to lose a power if we compare with the previous election. In Hungary, for instance, it remains the same thing. Okay, so each country has particularities, and by the end of the day, the rapport de force we have identified, so we have in the previous slides. So in the next slides, I have identified the authoritarian and populist party in the European Parliament. Timbro, this is a think tank coming from Sweden, publish regularly, monitoring regularly the populist party in the European Union. They are doing this since almost 40 years, something like that. Based on that, because it's very difficult to identify which party it is a populist or not, we have identified the party that has been defined by Timbro, and then based on this prediction, we can assume that at the European level, 256, almost more than the third of the members of the European Parliament, will belong in a populist party. A populist party, generally speaking, it is anti-European. Why? Because populist party, they want to bridge the people with the authority, with the party, bypass all the, let's say, the institutions. So if they are doing that at the national level, you can imagine that it is Europe as another institution at another level. It is easier to let's say, to be anti-European and populist. That doesn't mean that all the populist party are anti-European, but most of the populist party are anti-European, and from the other side, most of the anti-European parties are populist. It is, let's say, a huge subset between those two concepts. If we can see that the most, let's say, the populist party have, let's say, a huge presence in Hungary, in Italy, France, for instance. Hungary, because it's the main, it's the government party, is a populist, considered as populist. Greece also, Cyprus. Greece, they consider in Greece the populist party, according to this Sweden think tank, the only non-populist party is New Democracy and PASOK. All the other parties, even Syriza, they consider as a populist party. This is, okay, this is, we can probably argue on this, we can discuss, but I take as grant in order to set up my analysis. So in some countries, more than 50% of the population represent themselves in the European Parliament with a populist party. So this is, I have produced based on the European elections 2019 and based on European election study, I have presented a map in which the horizontal axis is the European integration, okay? The vertical axis has no sense, okay? Just put it in order to don't collapse all the circle. Each circle is a political party. The size of the circle is the importance of the political party inside this, let's say, group. And we can see this is the map from EPP concerning European integration. So we can see that most of the party are very close to European integration. Here. This is the Socialist Party. So it is, let's say, a little bit more clear, the European integration, the map. This is the ECR, which is much more, it's less European, it's much more in the center. This is the liberal, more let's say, integration. Next slide, this is the left. Okay. Greens. And then the ID, which is the less pro-European or the most anti-European political group in European Parliament. And I'm going now to present the composition of the EU Parliament since the start of the European Parliament, 1979. So it's difficult to compare, let's say, European Parliament between them because in every term we change the geography. We started in 1979 with 9 countries. 1984 it is 10 countries. 1989 it is 12 countries. 1994 is still 12 countries, but with Germany, because we had the reunification of the Germany, so automatically it is not the same as used to be in the previous session. 1999 it is 24 countries. 2004 is 26, 27. 2009, 26, 24, 9 is 27. 14 is 28 countries. 2019 it is also 28 countries, but we have Brexit, so that means UK participated in the elections, but they know that they are going to leave automatically. So this is, in my opinion, it is difficult to compare Europe, the parliamentary between them because it is not the same thing that we compare. And each time the number of seats also change. For this reason, in my opinion, it's difficult also to compare the turnout. We see the various papers that the turnout is going up or down, but we don't compare the same thing. If we would like to compare the turnout, we have to take the 8 countries of the initial election, how they have been in evolution. If we compare the turnout in this case, automatically we can see that there is a decline, of course, but if we compare this turnout with the turnout at the national elections, we can see also a decline. So that means the European elections follow the general trends of decline of the public opinion. Okay, now as I've said that we have created for Eurobarometer 3 major indices that they allow us to better understand the results. So instead, for instance, to have a question and try to use the demographic aspect and understand what is the behavior, we go kind of reverse engineering. We try to identify a group with the same type of behavior, and then we try to follow how this group react on the various questions of Eurobarometer. We have created 3. This is that I have, as I told, I have presented this in WAPOR in Salzburg, but we have published also the results in ELIAMEP. It is in English, so if somebody would like to know more detail of this methodology. I just focus on life satisfaction because life satisfaction is the compiled three major questions. The first question is the life satisfaction in general. If you are satisfied with the life that you conduct, yes or no. If you are have a job satisfaction, if you are happy with the job that you conduct, and then also finance of the household. If you are so it is very important to have those three questions in order to create a subset of the population that they are very happy or unhappy. Okay, if they are not happy with, let's say, your life, your job, and finance, in this case, you have probably different behavior. This is the ranking of the member states concerning the population that they are unsatisfied. We have, let's say, people in countries like Netherlands, Luxembourg, Sweden, Denmark, that this population is very low, less than 5%. We have on the other side, countries like Bulgaria, Greece, Hungary, Portugal, for instance, where the unsatisfied population is very high. Germany is something between them, okay, between the satisfied and unsatisfied population. Let's have a look on the questions, and I just pick up two countries, Germany and Greece. The question is if it is better to be outside of the European Union in order to face the future, okay? So let's have a look on Germany. This is the general population. So the majority of the population rejected this idea. They think that it's better to be in the European Union in order to face the future. And this is the population that they agree with this idea. So there's a clear majority in the general public. However, if you go deeper and you identify the subset of the people, unsatisfied people, you can see that there's a majority in this population that they think that it's better to go outside of the European Union. Okay? And this is the satisfied people where the gap between the two ideas is huge. So that means those unsatisfied people, they have a clear anti-European, let's say, a Europhobia, if you can say. Same thing in Greece. However, even the unsatisfied, they think that it's better to be inside the European Union than outside the European Union. So I have another question that is very interesting. It is when we discuss about EU, what is bring to your mind? What it means to you personally? And we have, let's say, how many? There are 14 ideas. Half of them are positive and half of them are negative. Positive, it is, let's say, peace, it is economic prosperity, democracy, social protection. Negative ideas, it is, let's say, the bureaucracy, waste of money, lose of cultural identity, etc., etc. If we compare the population to population, we can see automatically, even for the, let's say, the average of the population, it's quite positive. However, for the people that they are belongs to unsatisfied persons, it is very negative. So I mean, it is another way to focus, to identify that the unsatisfied people, they are not happy with the European Union. Same thing for Greece, okay? I'm not going to focus on Greece. And then the last analysis, we have done also other questions, we have analyzed other questions, but just pick up 3 of them. It is if the EU image is positive or negative. So in Germany, for instance, the unsatisfied, the majority of the people, they think that is negative, public opinion. The average is very positive. 70% of the Germans think that is positive. But the unsatisfied people, it is negative. Okay? Same thing for Greece. So that means we have a clear, let's say, correlation between the idea of unsatisfaction of the life and the perception of EU. We can use this population and then go deeper. Probably this is something for the communication, because we can do a demographic analysis to know the profile of those persons, school, age, if they are dealing with political battles, etc. So that means if we would like to do a micro-targeting communication and we would like to focus on this population, it's probably a way to identify the profile and let's say, and communicate better, because communication in our way is not a general communication. We need to focus on some questions. So my last slides, I did the analysis for Germany. It is concerning the 6 major crises that the European Union has managed. Crisis on migration, crisis on pandemic, crisis on the financial and economic matters, crisis of climate change, crisis on pandemic, crisis on the Brexit. So this is the major crisis. And analyze the response, positive, negative, etc., and have created a special index. And here we have, let's say, the blue one is the average at EU level. The red one is the former East Germany. The yellow one is the former West Germany. If the lines are close to the center, that means more of the people are dissatisfied of the way that the European Union has managed the crisis. If the line is close to the periphery, it means that people are satisfied with the way that the European Union has managed. So what we can observe that West Germans are more, let's say, satisfied than the average of the European Union people, the way that the European Union has managed this crisis. However, in East Germany, we consider the opposite. So that means, in my opinion, we have, let's say, a gap between those two countries. It deserves, I think, a kind of research to better understand what is hidden behind this idea. And automatically, we can identify, given if people is, let's say, anti-European, automatically it's a potential voter for populist party. And also we can see the rise of some political parties, especially Germany or in France, etc., of those populist party, because of this dissatisfaction. So this is what I would like to share with you. There is a lot of other results that we can probably go deeper, but I'm at your disposal to respond to your questions, and I thank you very much for your attention.
We thank you. We thank you, Andonis, because, I mean, the findings are very interesting, I think also for our colleagues here at the panel. And it proves, you know, some gap with reality, on the other hand, if I'm allowing to say so. Because this criticism and doubts about the institutional frames in both sides of the Atlantics are not based on facts quite often. And I would say the rupture between the general public and the institutions have occurred after the appearance of the new way of communication, the new media, as we call it, because we have a more direct way of communication. People are communicating without the traditional media. And so we have these bubbles, let's say, that are reinforcing mutually each other, the communities. So I'm very grateful to Nancy, who spends, no, I mean it, and this is an opportunity to stress it again, because Nancy is one of the pioneers of public diplomacy in US and also now in Japan she is. And she has worked on how, we can match public opinion and institutions. So I think going from the other side of the Atlantic, where I'm afraid to say so, everything started, because with the Tea Party and then Trump, I think we had this outburst of what we call populism. Yeah. But for these people, they don't consider themselves populist. I mean, they consider that us elitists refer to them as populists. Yeah, please.
Okay, great. I've got my work cut out for me, just to remind you all. There couldn't be any more of a contrast than in the data presented here and the reality of the US. So when you talk about an outburst of the last few years, we may be facing, you ain't seen nothing yet, because the November election, for many Americans, when I talk to friends and family, and I do live outside the US about half of the year, they would like to cancel the election altogether, because whoever wins, and if it's Trump versus Biden, there is going to be some type of an eruption that will make perhaps January 6, 2021 look like a playground. I'm extremely concerned about anticipating what's happening, to the degree that I insisted in a book that's coming out later this year. It's the 8th edition of the Propaganda and Persuasion textbook by Sage. And I told my editors, I don't want people to live with such fear. I want especially young people to have a sense of hope. So they allowed me at the last minute to write an introductory message of some hope that they need to speak up, they need to rally, they need to really live democracy, not just theoretically, but also do it in an environment where we don't want to take each other out physically. I mean, it's remarkable. Last week, I gave 2 back-to-back talks here about Trump in different settings. And there were Trump supporters in the group, and that most were against Trump. But those who were supporters, when they came up to me afterwards, they were sort of relieved. There was some acknowledgement that he could possibly be president again, that I wasn't being dismissive or deriding him, because I know the support that he's getting in the US. But my sense related to taking public opinion polls, when we think of disinformation, keep this in mind. How many of you have ever had a pollster call you and ask you who you're going to vote for? Now, I used to live in New Hampshire. That was like going shopping there, because that was the first in the nation presidential primary. It's very common to get a phone call. Most people, though, have the mobile phone and they can't be bothered. And if they are asked, are they obligated to say who they're going to vote for? So I think we could be dealing with a lot of Trump supporters who are staying very quiet and on the down low, because there's so much anger. Biden is not tracking, nor is his vice president. Even the news media, even if some of the media are in support of Biden, they will cover not policy platforms, not differences within the EU member states, but rather the personality. So Biden goes to Atlanta, gives a talk at the historically Black, prestigious Morehouse College over the weekend. What were the headlines? Not so much on what he said, but on the fact that there were students who got up and put their back to him. And also the valedictorian called him out on the support for Israel and the sending of more weapons, military support. So that's one image. And then you have Trump in a Manhattan courtroom who, again, whatever the outcome there, could be seen as under sort of a certain persecution by the liberals, in America. So it's however you spin it. And, when you said, yes, our environment has changed, it's not based on facts, but I often say, don't let facts get in the way of a good story. I mean, how many of us really care about facts? We are looking for people who often think the way we do. This is sort of the progression. I want to share a statistic I just looked up. I had no idea. It's nearly now 49% of the voters, the US adult voters in the US, are independent. They've had it with both of the political parties. That also suggests a lack of unity in the United States. We are not coming together the way it may have been years ago when I was in college or even graduate school, where a Democrat and a Republican could disagree with each other, but then go have a drink or go have a meal together. Now it is becoming an outrageous point to make in social media versus another outrageous point to make. So track that independent voter. That is something I think in contrast to what you all address here in the EU. And what I thought I was going to talk about, I just want to mention, I came across an article yesterday looking at the Vatican, and it struck me that there are members of the Vatican, you know, holy men sending out letters supporting the less populism and more unification of the EU. And it's directly related to what's going to happen in the US. Because the real fear with Trump is that he will turn his back on the EU, NATO, whatever it may be. I think too, so when I said about the independent party, neither Biden or Trump, they've already got the supporters they have. And the youth vote increasingly is saying, Mr. Biden, I'm not going to vote for you. I don't know how that'll play out. It won't mean necessarily that they will vote for Trump, but they may stay home. So those numbers who came out in 2020 are likely not to be there. We could be seeing some real chaotic numbers. The dominant party, as I said now, with the independents, it's like what I say when I enter a store and I say, I'm just looking, I'm just shopping. So neither candidate really has the loyalty, and there isn't the discussion about policy and a political platform. Very few Americans will turn into the DNC, once you have the nominee, that's a very low percentage, as you know. And what we will monitor a bit is the so-called October surprise. So what will that be? It could be a number of surprises, but I am, as somebody in persuasion and propaganda, I have never felt so dejected in my career, which is probably why I keep doing this type of work, because we need our journalists. We need our traditional journalists. I still love the Associated Press. I love Reuters. I love C-SPAN. I love a training that comes in that gives you the facts. And then if you want to have the opining, you can do that too. But they lead with the facts. And unfortunately, we're not in that environment now. So I think I'll stop. I was just sort of free channeling here as I was listening to you all. Thank
you, Nancy. We will come back during the discussion. But I mean, when we are talking about facts, I mean, and the importance of facts, I was thinking exactly about this yesterday afternoon when the news broke about the accident of the Iranian. And I said, I mean, events. Who said that? Events. So we cannot ignore the facts, despite the fact that we are distorting. So Betty, you have worked for many years on public opinion, tools, disinformation, maybe, I mean, cyber attacks. So what is this new environment we are living in?
So first, let me thank you very much for this invitation and being part of this really interesting conversation and exchange of ideas and resources and data. First, let me start with that. I would like to start from, that was not the plan, but facts and stories. That really struck me. So the Edelman Trust Report, do you know Edelman is one of the biggest consulting global agencies that every year they're issuing their annual trust report. This trust report is consulted by government, media, communicators, not just communicators, civil society and so on. So the title for 2024 is Pro-Science. Let's bring back science. And why is that? Because it's not enough to provide fact-checked, evidence-based stories and data. In this polarized environment, where everyone has their own, let's say, version of truth, like a hipster lifestyle approach that has been cultivated the last 20 or 30 years through postmodernism. Now we're in an environment that we trust no one, and this is one of the key successes, let's say, of putting campaigns on disinformation. Trust no one, trust no institutions, trust no science. So here it is. Storytelling is very important, and data-driven storytelling is very important. Data-driven, so facts and stories are together. They're not, let's say, in a conflict. They're not two different worlds. But what happens when the stories, when the fact-checked evidence is still considered as fabricated? And I think this is the one thing I would like to highlight. All right. So this is the first one. The other one is that because we have discussed a lot about social media as the bubble sphere versus legacy versus institutions, and how to bring back trust into the institutions, the system, right? System as an evil. And let's say the different bubbles around the society through digital presence considered as the non-toxic environments by many citizens around the world. So what is an interesting fact is that from 2019 onwards, what we observe according to Digital News Report by Reuters is that users, public, citizens, audiences, whatever you might call them, they gradually have moved out the public sphere, and social media are still public sphere. They are not just private citizens or private interests. They are still operating in the public sphere. All right, what has happened? The emergence of encrypted messaging apps. Those are the winners. The encrypted messaging like WhatsApp, Viber, Discord, Telegram, even Messenger. So even we try to regulate with the Code of Conduct on Misinformation, recently organized by the European Commission, 2022, now in operation, what they leave out of the radar as those hybrid spaces between private and public. And I think those are the real laboratories, the real influential laboratories for bubbles, unchecked stories and information outside the radar of transparency and accountability. And when you see the large platforms and search engines to, of course, be part of the new Code of Misinformation in collaboration with the European Union, European Commission, at the same time, their investments, the big investments, are towards the private messaging apps. Right. So I think this finding that started to be highlighted since 2019 now is still valid in a 2023 report. So this is, I think, the major element that is change maker, because we are focusing only on what happens in the public sphere. But now we don't have just public and private, we have hybrid things, right? And those that's why the key stakeholders and actors of information and disinformation are also moving their playground, their game in those spheres. So we don't, it's the public, the opinions, the perceptions, the ideas, this is where they are happening. I think this is the most important thing. So we need more, let's say, collaboration. And I think the European Union is in the right direction when they are focusing through this code of conduct on disinformation to bring together different stakeholders from the platforms, advertising companies, civil society, researchers, fact checkers, and also in partnership with the observatories about media. No one can really provide one solution from their own angle and perspective, where no matter how powerful or institutional they should be. So I think one thing is this ecosystem approach, which is also brings us also into this idea of deliberations with the citizens, which is also one of the big experiments by European Union. So we need to bring citizens in those fora that are, I would say, the same fora that we convene the stakeholders, the institutional stakeholders. So this give me voice, give me control. I do my own research. This is how we can, they can co-shape a trust environment for information, for stories, need to be heard, to be respected. I think this is very, very important. And I think many of the innovations, tech innovations, human tech innovations, I think they start recognizing that this is a real opportunity to bring back deliberations, trusted deliberations that bring together tech, communicators, stakeholders, and citizens. I think this is one of the areas that we should focus more and more, I would say, rather than thinking. Another comment I would like to, that it was interesting because I was taking notice, and this is one area that, so it's about the happiness. So this is very true that in a doomsday, serious global environment, no one will really embrace the system. The system was trusted as long as it could somehow secure, I would say, a more happy, prosperous future. So when we have to share only, permacrisis stories, that everything is failing, and also Europe being, I would say, in a panic. All right. This panic actually accentuates the reactions of many citizens, electorates, communities, or vested interests. This is where the exploitation of this fear is happening. And the other thing is the emotions, why the emotions are prevailing. Because emotions are, I would say that are shortcuts to our fear. This is how we can handle. So we make, I would say, emotional yet logical choice to embrace the people, the powers that gives us any type of hope. So the shortcuts, so happiness and how we make our choices are very, very well connected. Of course, you might also observe that the happiness guru are all over very successful. Okay, that's why this is not just a lifestyle. This is also a political choice. So it's not only about the media. It's not just the media. And the social media is not the bubbles, really. We don't have this. If we look at the research we are having, does not really say that the major issue with the bubbles. are in the social media anymore, and social media are losing power. So the main issue might come from legacy media that are also have their own game in the digital sphere, both in social and the private hybrid spaces. Misinformation usually comes from the top, as Rasmus Kleis-Nielsen said several times. He's the director of Oxford Digital News Report, which is very, very interesting. And I think what matters is to bring, again, citizens as part of the main game. And I would like to share one project we had back in 2019 and later, which is a public diplomacy program that was funded and supported by US diplomacy under the umbrella of digital literacy. The first one, we called it The Room Where It Happens, after the musical, Disney musical, and Hamilton. And the room where it happens are those encrypted spaces. People want to be where the power is, to be in control and in power. Right. So they will go wherever. So they choose their own rooms where things can happen and they control them and they can shape them. And then the second project was also a US diplomacy funded program. We called it Disinfohacks. It was in partnership with Aristotle University and DCN Global. So we addressed exactly, we took this kind of approach of ecosystem approach. What happened was that we struggled to bring stakeholders around the table in co-creation workshops. And the ones that were reluctant to join us back in 2021, that was before the code of conduct on misinformation, were the communication people and the platforms. They were really reluctant to join the experiment. So that was very, very interesting to see that 1 year later, we had these developments at the European Union level, and I think this is on the right direction. So this is the question for us. So what are those rooms that things can happen in a way that we are part of the game, not outliers or observers? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Betty. We will come back because you raised some interesting points that I would like to come back later in the discussion. I will pass now the floor to Annie by asking, since we are in favor of the European project for decades, and also, the presentation that Antonis made, reveals some lack of trust toward the European project and the Europeans as a whole. And you have served, as I said, both during your journalistic career, you covered European affairs and then you joined the parliament. Despite the fact that, fortunately, the mainstream parties are not losing ground to the extent that it is presented in the public sphere. In the public sphere, the debate is focused, oh my God, they are going to win, the ultra-conservatives and far-right, etc. But the findings prove that this is not the case. But still, in the debate at European level, it's not Greece, it's not Germany, it's not Holland. You see that there is a lack of confidence towards the European ideas, let's say, what the European Union is about. So this, if you agree, this is the essence of the discussion we should make. Please.
Thank you very much, Ino, for your kind introductory remarks, and especially for the invitation. I thank you both. Before answering, I feel a bit uncomfortable, so I would like to sit next to Jenny to be able to look you and the people that are following the discussion. Okay. This is a very interesting question. Since we had already an extremely interesting discussion and very, very interesting interventions from all of you, and the data that you just presented to us in the beginning, a very short remarks before answering Ino's question. I think there is a confusion between opinion and news, facts. This is one point. And I think that this confusion, this difficulty to make a clear distinction between what is a fact, an event, and what's a perception affects even us that are supposed to be opinion-making leaders. You know, we are very familiar with the public sphere. I was talking with Ino last night on the phone just after we heard the news about the disappearance. In the beginning, there was no information about the collapse or fall of the helicopter of the Iranian president. It was disappeared in the beginning. And, you know, we were trying to understand what happened. And then even today, that there is an official announcement of what has happened. And we are very rational people in this room. And we have to take the arguments and the proofs for given. I'm sure that some of us have second thoughts in our heads, you know. So let us try to figure out for a second what ordinary people are faced with. I mean, how they are able or not, or they are not able to form an opinion of something that is going on. One point is that. Second point is that it's not just the social media. The social media, of course, deteriorated a lot because there is no regulation at all, and there is, you know, all this. If you have, for example, 500,000 views, I mean, I can give you examples. I have a son of 19 years old, and he believes that, you know, I'm a part of an elite because I follow the official media. And he says, you can see here, he has 500,000 supporters and views. How can you object this and say that this is not a fact, you know? But even before, the landscape in the media has radically changed during the last 30 years in reality. And I'll turn immediately to what Ino asked, but I have something to share with you. I've read the book many years ago, just after the French referendum on the constitutional treaty, you know, the reject of the constitutional treaty by French people. It was, I don't remember, many years ago. 95, okay. There were no social media at the time, you know. And I don't remember, unfortunately, the name of the author, but I do remember that he was the editor of a very famous French magazine, which is called, I don't know if it's still circulating, the Nouvel Observateur, that's the name. And he wrote a book just after the referendum named La Reine du Monde, the Queen of the World. And the book was dedicated to the eruption of the email. And he was saying that when the referendum was declared, and at the same time, it was the beginning of this new era of electronic correspondence, okay, that replaced the normal traditional correspondence. Politicians, editors, journalists started to receive thousands of email from people, from citizens, that they were expressing their opinion for whatever, with very strong, beliefs. And to conclude to that, he said that this new era, and we are talking about the 1990 decade, totally changed everything, because we were not able anymore to make the distinction between representation, what's the representative democracy, for example, who is the one who is represented and who is the one who represents, who is the one who has the authority and the legitimacy to circulate news, facts, and who is not. So everything got very, very, very confused. And this is, of course, on Nino's question, I think that the issues are very much interrelated. To my view, the suspicion, the disregard is not towards the European project as such, is broader and deeper, the problem. The disregard and suspicion is against any kind of representative organizations, and especially political representative organizations. And one point. The second point is that very often local, regional, multinational elections, as it is the elections for the European Parliament, are conceived as, not very crucial ones. So citizens believe that this is an occasion, an opportunity for them to express their anger, their disappointment, mainly towards their own national representatives. And this is the safe way to do it, by choosing to express anger and the disappointment in this vote, in this kind of vote, which is not exactly the same with what's going on in the United States right now. Although we have a lot of examples of national elections in Europe during the last year, 1.5 years, where we are also witnessing a significant rise of anti-European, populistic, sometimes extreme right forces. So the problem is here. I don't know what's going to happen in the elections of the between 6 and 9 of June, but we clearly have a problem. And an additional point about what we have discussed on the new landscape of media, social media, et cetera, has to do with the responsibility of the so-called mainstream political parties and the media, Nancy. The media also have responsibility, but talking about the European Parliament elections, there is clearly a strong responsibility, to my view. What's at stake in reality in the forthcoming elections? Almost 500,000 of EU citizens are going to elect their 720 representatives for the European Parliament. So it's not the internal national balance of power which is at stake in the elections of the 9th of June. What is at stake is the balance of power between European political families. That's what is at stake. And especially, as Mr. Papakostas pointed out, in these elections, which are more crucial to my view than similar European Parliament elections in the past. And some of the reasons were already mentioned. And this has to do with elections, with the forthcoming election in the United States. So I was saying, I forgot. Okay. What is at stake is the balance of power between European political parties, and especially this time, the balance of power between pro and anti-European forces. That's at stake. So the responsibility I mention is because I'm not talking only about Greece. Of course, Greece is not a very, flattering example, but in other EU member states, there are similar responsibilities. There is there is a very limited public discussion on what's really at stake. And my last point, so the balance of power and the balance of power between pro and anti-European forces and in general, the European political families. For what? In order to make sure that, the European Parliament, which is a co-legislator for almost 95% of all European legislation. Here is something else that, we never talk about it. It's like, if the Parliament doesn't give his approval in the 95% of the legislation, there is no legislation. If the Parliament rejects, for example, the new head of the European Commission or any appointed commissioner from the member states, there is no European Commission. There is no. I mean, the person has to be replaced, and we don't talk at all about this. Last point. Why it's crucial? Because since 2019, when we had the previous European Parliament elections, the world has radically changed. Nothing is in 2024 like it was in 2019. We have a sequence of more or less violent shocks and crises. It started with the COVID-19 pandemic. What the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated to us Europeans, we had no respirators. We had no hygiene masks. And all of a sudden we realized that we are very vulnerable, very weak in terms of manufacturing capacity. And then a year later, we had Russia's aggression in Ukraine. So security issues all of a sudden came to the broad scene, but not only security issues. Europe was very, very much energy dependent to Russia. So we passed through a very painful energy crisis. And the energy crisis led to an economic, not crisis, but, difficult situation, inflation, et cetera, et cetera. To conclude, to make my point why it's very important, the 5 years that we have ahead of us. For all these reasons, Europe, I suppose that we have all realized that we're extremely dependent on issues of military security and of issues of economic security. And a small point here, economic issues are more and more interlinked with national security issues. You cannot make a distinction between the two. The world, not only in terms of security, but also in terms of economic security, of global trade, has nothing to do with the one that we had familiar, and it has nothing to do with the circumstances that led to the creation of the European project as a project of peace and cooperation. So Europe and the European project has to radically change in order to survive. For example, Nancy, we are very much concerned with the situation in the United States, of course, but with the risk of being conceived, cynic, which I'm not. I'm saying that in the end of the road, the United States is a superpower. Maybe you will pass through a difficult period, but you will be here. We don't have the United States of Europe. Yeah. And in this new geopolitical environment, totally unpredictable, if Europe doesn't make some concrete steps, to get more, to be stronger, get more unified, be able to handle more efficiently the different issues that it's faced with, not only the project, but personally, I believe every European country, including the major economies, will not be able to deal with new circumstances. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Annie. Also, you raised very, very important points. And okay, the last 2 points, that these are the points raised by Macron in his famous speech at the Sorbonne, because he said specifically that, we Europeans, we outsourced our security to the Americans and our energy to Russia. So, what? Anyway, I have, and I am definitely in favor of the French baguette anyway. So at least we didn't outsource it. I have many comments based on your presentations, but I think it would be more fair also to abide by what we said about the lack of the crisis of representation. I would say that first, let's turn the microphone to our friends present here. If there are any comments or questions, please, you have to come to the floor. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Artemisa Neto from the Fulbright Foundation. First of all, I would like to thank you for a very informative, for many informative presentations, all of them, a lot of food for thought. And I have just 2 remarks. One has to do with Mr. Papakostas, and thank you also for this very interesting sort of like the polls. And you mentioned about the life satisfaction, and like how this correlates also the life satisfaction with wanting to belong in Europe or not wanting to belong in Europe. It wasn't clear to me, at least, which were the dissatisfied countries. One was.
I just respond. That means the idea is to, let's say, to identify the people that the percentage of the population that are dissatisfied in each country, and automatically we can find a correlation between the people that satisfy and reinforce the European Union. For instance, the countries that they are very pro-Europeans, like Denmark, Sweden, Luxembourg, etc., they have a very low population that they are dissatisfied. From the other side, countries like Bulgaria, Greece, Cyprus, with a population that the population that are dissatisfied, at the European feeling, it's very high. So that means, as it is, there is no clear correlation. However, this is a factual finding that probably could lead us to a conclusion that there is dissatisfied people. They are dissatisfied with the institutions. They are dissatisfied with government. They are dissatisfied with the system. And automatically, by the end of the day, they are dissatisfied with the European Union. And also, just I conclude my parenthesis, those populations, they are not interested in political matters. This is another demographic that let's say, huge gap between people that are dealing the interest in public public matters. Okay, sorry. Did I reply to your?
Absolutely. I misunderstood. That's why I thought you said the reverse, and I was like, how can that be?
No.
Thank you for that. And the other comment about what is at stake in the balance of the powers between the European political families parties. Our concern should also be there is very little information and sort of like engaging citizens in different countries to actually vote, because they feel a complete disconnect, and nor do we know each sort of like member of different parties that is contesting, other than what their CV is, like what is the position towards burning issues in the EU. And sort of like observing the media for the Euro elections, I have not seen a tremendous drive to engage people, get off your couch, go and vote. And even in our own country, the municipal elections last October, wasn't it? I mean, in the repeat, there was a tremendously low percentage of individuals that went to vote, and then a number of these individuals that did not vote were the ones actually that were complaining. So how can we complain if we don't speak? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very right point, and while a vice president of the European Parliament up to 2014, and as a former journalist, I was responsible in the Bureau of the European Parliament for the campaign, for the election campaign in 2014 at that time. Then the institutions, the Parliament, the European Commission, in general, a couple of months before the elections are starting, campaigns, but it's too little and too late, as we were saying in the elections, So there is a clear gap. There is, to my view, there is a responsibility in the institutions because they are not very, the interaction between the EU decision-making and the EU citizens, not governments and political parties, directly citizens, is very problematic to my view. This is one point. And the second point is that what I was saying before, the responsibility of the national political parties, take into consideration for a moment what's going on in Greece. What kind of public discussion do we have? We have a public discussion on the internal balance of power, on the difference between the first and the second and the third, the stability or not the stability. According to the polls, as Mr. Papakostas knows very well, for example, in France, the party of extreme right of Mrs. Le Pen is, I think, without any doubt, going to be the winner of the elections. Okay. What does that mean? That the President Macron has to resign and that France won't have a government? No. So there is a responsibility here because the use, and this is not only in relation with the elections. I experienced the period of the crisis in the European Parliament, So without certainly denying that there were significant mistakes in the way that the European Union dealt with the Greek and the broader Eurozone crisis. There were mistakes, but there was no experience and there was no how, and there were no institutions. But I will never forget that the perception in Greece for quite some time was that we were fine and that the EU was mean and Merkel was mean, and that, we were suffering because the European Union was punishing us, okay? And now I'm talking, let me put it the other way around. Germany, for example, Germany very much had a great benefit from the internal market, exports, from the euro also, again, exports, banks, German and French banks were very strong. I mean, you know, before the collapse of the crisis. So the perception in many Germans at that time that we cannot anymore give money to those seen people that are lazy and they don't work, etc., etc., etc. Why I'm saying all this? I'm saying all this because I strongly believe that people are normal. I mean, are normal and they are rational. But if you manipulate them to have internal political gains, you know, then, you know, you create very significant problems. And a last point, Artemis and Mr. Papakostas, because I think it's very interesting. In the last Eurobarometer, you showed some cards, but what really was, you know, very impressive to me was the following. There was a question, which is, according to you, the main priorities that the EU has to deal with in the next 5 years. The EU average, I mean, the average of all the respondents was security and defense. Normal. We have a war within Europe and a war in our neighborhood. Greek respondents had this answer third. Why? Because Greeks are familiar with defense, security. They are living in a difficult geopolitical environment. So it's not, there is nothing new to them that security and defense is important. And so the first response, the most attractive one, was growth, economic growth. Economy was the most. I mean that what people respond in the polls, in the Gallups, is very much related to their own, you know, to their own experiences. And last point, my fear, last point, is that the abstention, there is a risk, there is always an abstention in this kind of election. But the risk is that those that are going to abstain this time are not the angry people, you know, those that they want to express their anger, their disappointment, they want to punish, etc., they will certainly go to vote. So there is a clear risk that the other ones, the ones that understand, for example, the value of the European project, might not go you know, in great numbers to vote.
Expectations. Oh, I'm sorry. They're skewing young people's expectations to the point where they're frustrated before they get out of bed in the morning. And the cities or the communities that have high satisfaction in Minnesota tend to be ones with very high immigrant populations that have low expectations and are simply happy that their toilets flush. And so, you know, when you talk of satisfaction, the expectations, and we worked on a Homeland Security grant with the students, and Homeland Security wanted the students to identify in private and public and accountable sources of information the adjectives that went with the facts. And the students found that the facts were almost the same, close. You know, you might call it an event, but the president of Iran is still dead. But the way you skew it changes how people perceive it. And then there's one more thing, because I love Nancy. I enjoy everything about her, but I'm more hopeful about the election in that I think that the quiet people in the polling now are the pro-Biden, because I don't want to admit that I would vote for Biden. And I did not like Biden in 1992 with the Anita Hill hearing. Maybe it was 90. But there are so many people who are concerned about the rights to reproductive health and the rights to free press and all of those kinds of things that I think that is this go round what is going to secretly sway the election. And then I also, one more piece of hope for the United States is that Trump does not control the institutions at this election. And I think that will stabilize things a little bit. But this has been a fabulous presentation. And, you know, the idea of how the private media is not accountable and how people take out their frustrations. And I would love to hear more about your polling and, you know, the saliency, because there's a salient people who are, you know, Trump or die. And there are secret ones that are pro-reproductive health or die. And so that's what I think would be the wash. But you have just piqued my energy and my ideas, and I cannot say thank you enough. So thank you very much.
Who would like to take the floor? No? Is there any comment from the audience? If not, let me come back to you, Andonis, because we have some time left. In regards to what I asked Annie about the Europeans, the belief to the European project, the adhesion of European public opinion, because you have been for many years in charge of the Eurobarometer, so you have a very comprehensive view of how the public opinion in EU evolved.
Yes. There are various questions that we would like to analyze, and we have some trends. I would like to focus to just one question. This is what I have presented, if we are going to face the future better outside the EU or inside the EU. And the way that we have asked this question, it is very negative. That means the positive response, it is outside, and the negative response, it is, let's say, inside, which is also, I think it is, the response, it's much more, let's say, reliable. It is not, let's say, direct response saying yes or no. No is positive, yes, it's negative. So I think it is well done question. Let's take this question, and I did also a comparison because we ran this question over several years. This question, what was the response before the Brexit, and how has been evolved after the Brexit? We can see that because Brexit is a fact, and there is collateral damage, but also there are collateral benefits, in my opinion. And when we are going to observe, most of the Europeans are against to leave the European Union, except some countries, France, for instance, which is very specific, okay? So that means very specific, it's very important. That means, because during this period, we have got a lot of internal events that, let's say, affect the public opinion. So generally speaking, most of the people, most of the Europeans, they don't want to leave the European Union. This is a kind of negative, but positive by the end of the day. And they're going to stay. This is my opinion. This is the involvement of the public opinion. Before Brexit, I think that it was a decline probably of the membership, etc. But after the Brexit and with the management of the various crises as pandemic, for instance, people they prefer to stay in the European Union. And I would like also to take another opportunity to underline the fact of management of the crisis, and and the perception of the life. We have asked the question: what if you think that European Union has managed correctly or not the pandemic. Okay, the policy. The policy is the same in Greece, Sweden, Portugal, Slovenia. It's exactly the same thing. The perception is different. And what we see that the Nordic country, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, they are very much in favor of the way that we have managed this pandemic. However, in Greece, Cyprus, Bulgaria, Romania, for instance, we are very, let's say, we're very negative. So what does it mean? That mean that we have higher standard than Denmark and Sweden? No, this is the fact that the perception that we got to institutions is very negative, that automatically affect the way that we conclude this opinion. The way that we manage crisis, it's exactly the same in all countries. Why? We ask a question about if the economy of the European Union goes well or not. The economy is the same. There's no difference between Greece and Sweden. Sweden, they think we're going very, it's the European go very well. We think, no, it's not good. So that means either our standards are different, it's not the case, definitely, but we have been affected by the way that institutions, the trust with institutions.
I mean, if you go to the other side, Nancy, I mean, because we are, as you can understand, I mean, being so dependent from America finally, because we are not going to get rid easily from the American umbrella, and maybe we don't wish so. I mean, where you would put the starting point of this deep divide in American public opinion? I mean, that brings two fronts, one populistic and the other one still following, let's say, what we will call American values, liberal values.
Well, actually, in terms of the rise of independents who often take issue with the duopoly, and that includes me. I'm an independent. I don't like either party, and I vote for the candidate. That trend began in the immediate aftermath of the end of the Cold War. So I worked for the Clinton administration at the State Department and U.S. Information Agency. When we think of Clinton, you can go back and look at the literature. The Clinton doctrine, the economic enlargement, the newly industrializing countries of the former Soviet Union, we put a lot of emphasis on one-way technical exchange, teaching these countries about the free press and so on. NAFTA was big. But what also occurred under Clinton, Bosnia, Serbia, I mean, there was a continuation of intervention that was not well received. And then you add, and you had the political polarization, as I mentioned earlier, which just got exacerbated. But I think there's a lot to untangle with the independent voter. So I agree with you, Pat. There are the quiet Biden supporters as well. My point was more about we don't like, as a whole, if you look at the polls, people are not crazy about either candidate because of the age factor of really being, it's beyond ideology. It's sort of, is that the best we can do? And I didn't even address the U.S. image problem. As an American, nobody's neutral wherever I go in the world when they meet me, when they know I'm a U.S. citizen. It's either, America, or it's, oh, America. So it's polarized for me as a global citizen, but I carry a U.S. passport. So the U.S. image is really undergoing a hit. Either way, whatever the outcome, I think we are losing our moral authority. And I would say to this group, since you all are in the EU, I want the EU to step up. I don't want the US to keep dictating so much around the world. And that's my right. It's coming from a market democracy. I am always holding my country's feet to the fire that we can do better. And frankly, the US dominates so much in entertainment, we know military, economy. One other point about whatever happens, for many Americans having to do with life satisfaction, under Biden, there's going to be a lot made about this because they've already agreed, Biden and Trump, to 2 debates, and there may be one even as early as next month. I mean, it can, of course, change. Inflation, how people feel in their pocketbook. We often talk about that in political science. That goes back decades. But it's one thing, inflation impacting, say, my group of peers, and it's another if you were hard hit by COVID and then you're working maybe 2 or 3 jobs and you're seeing every time you gas up, you go to the grocery, this rise up to 30% since between 2020 and 2024. So if you compare that to under Trump, of course, that was mostly pre-COVID, but he of course was in the first year of COVID as well. The economy, to many people, if they don't like Trump, they think that he would do better on the economy because Biden keeps making all these promises internationally. At the same time, there's so much pain and suffering at home. So I wish these candidates, these parties would listen more to the people and not be so elitist. I think there's an elitist aspect to a lot of this as well, that we who sit here, you know, we're part of the elitist class, aren't we? We forget that, but most Americans, I don't know about the Europeans, most Americans still don't have a 4-year college degree, much less a master's, a PhD. So that's why you will hear, you know, Barack Obama is not referencing, you know, Harvard. And I mean, they rarely will get into their background because they want to be relational to the people. So anyway.
You make, Betty, you made interesting points about the public sphere, how the public sphere has evolved. And but we finally, we ended up with a hybrid public sphere. I mean, because the old ways of communications have not disappeared yet. And then you have the new ways of communication. I would say that the control is not going to work, in my view. I mean, because the tools of technology are so powerful, but regulation can only be very limited. So this is one remark that I would. The second is that for the traditional communication, you had to use your mind more than your emotions. In the new ways of communication, you use your emotions than your mind. And so this is certainly more easily accepted, more easily perceived. If, for example, I saw Nancy's photo of the sea, of the coast, amazing. Immediately, I mean, I wish to swim. So it's stronger, the way of communication. All right, so I don't know if we can win the battle of reason, let's say.
Okay. The battle of reason is really on. That's why I've mentioned Edelman and not any other research, academic or otherwise, because it's interesting that Edelman and not other associations or consulting agencies have put straightforward the importance of the science as process to be able, you know, to reach truth and through falsification, actually, which has been lost. So the European Union is the offspring of reason and emotions. And I think this distinction that social media are sensational and emotional versus legacy media, I think it's also perception, it's also narrative, it's also, I would say, frustrated people that have to deal with a new environment, because sensationalism and emotional media, we had it before the digital, and that had been happening for many years. I could make reference back to the early 90s when our departments, three departments of communication, were inaugurated here in Greece, Pantheon, and Kapodistrian, National Kapodistrian, and Aristotle. Our first ever conference about media was Media in Crisis. Sensationalism. Where is the code of conduct? We don't have the trust. Yeah. So the trust, the erosion of trust, I would say, is an integral part, because media is part of the public sphere. That's why I insist on the public. And I think part of this misunderstanding of what are social media and private hybrid media is also part of the, I would say, negotiation of how we try to reestablish a digital physical architecture for the public sphere. Mm. So when you see that we try to withdraw not only the citizens, but also the investments into the private, is because you have less, you can be less accountable and have different rules. So, for example, this new code of conduct for disinformation is for the public part of the online big platforms and search engines. Has nothing to do, and even the, let's say, code of conduct rules that have applied into the private part, like messaging apps, are not really impactful. They're not. They have tried, let's say, to eliminate how many times you can reshare content when you're on WhatsApp. Yeah. WhatsApp is major in India, for example, is the main channel. TikTok. All right, TikTok, which is between. We're getting rid of that. All right. So, which is also a commercial place, right? Yeah. For everything. So I think this is where I think we should focus on that. And to reestablish the trust in the public sphere, in the process of deliberating, of reaching out truth or having consensus, how we disagree, not just agree. This is, again, this is the back to basics thing.
Also, there is something that we perceive, but we don't wish to accept, I'm afraid. And there I will ask your help, because there is a transfer of power that neither the political systems, not we as, let's say, enlightened citizens would like to accept. Through the technology, I mean, the institutions in persons are losing ground. Now, this is about political power, this is parliamentary power. So you have a transfer of power to new forms of power. I mean, who is more powerful, Zuckerberg or a head of state? And I'm not talking about, let's say, the US president. Take a state, I mean, X, medium state. So who is more powerful today? So this is why, this is why you have states that are so much controlled, like China, for example, with millions of public servants working on influence to counterbalance this power. Yeah, please.
Just the comment is that the fear of democratizing technology and giving access to the money of how we distribute power. I think one of the things that we never wish to share is that we want to frame democratization only into the institutional powers, stakeholders. So what has happened through digital revolution from, let's say, early 90s, let's say Web 1.0, to start, that was an existential fear, losing control. That's why there were a lot of books and articles out of control, what it means. So that's why the fear of the masses reemerged in an era where we have individualization, you know, custom things. Then again, the fear of the masses and the fear of the citizens. Okay, we want them to vote. Or do we want them to be part of the game?
Niels put his hand and saying, I was an orphan at your age too. This says everything. I don't know who EU official could do that. Sorry, Adonis. All right. Or Obama. These are my favorite presidents anyway, so you understand this. Obama writing in his memoirs about Hall that the main source of inspiration was when he went to the military hospital in Washington, I forgot the name, going to visit the soldiers. Exactly. Walter Reed, visiting and sitting with them. All right. Listen to them. Well, that's it.
I'll add that I met President Bill Clinton one time, and it was at a funeral. And the funeral was for Senator J. William Fulbright, and it was at the National Cathedral. And I tell everybody about this experience because at the end of the funeral, you could retire into a room. Hillary Clinton had been there at the funeral, but she had left, and Bill Clinton was working the room and going around and talking to people. I mean, I was at a loss for words, which is unusual for me. But it told me everything because the way he won the presidency was that old question about, you know, who do you want to have a beer with in the backyard barbecue? I mean, Bill Clinton had that ability to connect, which Hillary Clinton lacked, and Al Gore too. So I like balance between reason and emotion. I think we are very driven by emotion. And yes, there's a lot of manipulation there, but keeping things in balance is always good. And in politics, it is very much about, do you recognize yourself somewhat in that person? So I'll leave it.
No, just a question. I think, no. I'm not going to defend the institution just for the American elections. I think this is the first time for the American elections that we are going to judge on the plan B. Vice President, they are going to play a major role for this election, for both candidates. And I think this is the first time that the Vice President, the candidate Vice President, has much more, let's say, visibility than the previous one. I think this is
Because Trump voters didn't care about.
Repeat this discussion after the European elections, if you wish.
The American.
Yes, the American one, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much all. I think it was very interesting. Thank you.